Hi, welcome back. This is Statistics Chapter 5. We're going to talk about sampling methods. This is also covered in either Chapters 9 or Chapters 10, and I can't remember which of Grover Gray, so feel free to kind of watch one or the other, but if you're struggling with the concepts, it might be a good idea to watch both. So first up is sampling method. That's the process of selecting subjects for your study. Probability sampling is the probability of selecting each subject is known. So if you have an entire population, then you know how likely you are to sample however many people from that population. Simple random sampling is the most basic, and that's achieved by randomly selecting elements. Either you can write name on paper, you can use electronic methods, there's tables of random numbers in the back of your book. The point here is that you are randomly assigning people into the sample group. Stratified random sampling is used when the researcher knows what variables in the population are critical to provide representativeness. So a lot of times we use things like age, gender, race, socioeconomic status, and so on. Simple random sampling is used first, meaning we just randomly take a whole selection of the population, and then the results are sampled again using stratified sampling. And the researcher can target the number of random people that meet a strata. So strata is however many categories, whether that's at age, the gender, race, all that stuff. So if we know, for example, that 60% of the population is white, 20% is black, 15% is Hispanic, and 5% other, we want to make sure that 60% of our randomly sampled people are white, and 20% of our randomly sampled people are black, because that'll give us a representative sample of what we're actually working with. So cluster sampling means the researcher makes a list of all the states, cities, hospitals, doctors, whatever, that's linked to the identified population. So a randomized sample is then used in the study. So this is common when geography matters, but it's simply too expensive to study the whole state or the whole country. A complete list is not available to make a sampling frame, so we don't have a full sample here. We're trying to create a sample. So for example, we have stage 1 randomly selecting states out of the country. Stage 2 would be randomly selecting cities or towns within those states. And then at 3, we randomly select schools within those cities and towns. And then 4, we randomly select students within each one of those schools. So we still get a relatively generalized sample, but it's because we made it random every step of the way. We also have a number of sampling errors or biases that can occur. There is always some sampling error. You're never going to have a 100% sample if it's a big enough study. Sampling bias is a systematic error made when the sample selection is non-random. So that usually occurs if we're not paying attention to, say, your stratified sampling. Like, for example, we just know that we have a certain percentage of African American people that need to be represented, so we start hand selecting things. Sampling distribution is dependent on a large enough sample size. So you can see here, this is our bell curve. If we can kind of create enough people, we should end up with a bell curve type of sampling. And that's usually between 30 and 50 people as a minimum. Non-probability means that not every person has the same chance to be chosen into a study. So it's commonly used in nursing because we have a limited number of patients. So the most common is a convenience sample, and it's also called accidental sampling. And that means the participants happen to be in the right place at the right time. But it can cause multiple biases. So it's inexpensive, it's easily accessible, it doesn't take very much time, so it's okay for limited samples or for small populations. So for example, if we wanted to find the difference between SCD's use on the med-surg floor versus SCD's on Tele-A, we're using a convenient sample of those patients to test out a trial of some kind. We can also use quota sampling, which is a convenience technique which includes a strategy to get people who are less likely to be represented into the study. So they're using age here as a quota. So if we know that there's really not as many 11 to 21-year-olds in the age group, we're going to make sure that we provide a large enough sample that they are represented. So it's random, but it's not truly random because we're kind of picking and choosing to make sure that we get the right variety of people in our sample. That brings us to inclusion and exclusion properties. So inclusion is simply the list of characteristics a person has to have to be included in a study. And then exclusion is the list of characteristics that will prevent a person from participating into a study. And that's it for Chapter 5. If you have any questions, let me know.